I needed to like price. I'm like, if I gonna land there and get turned around, that was oh yeah. That's a video. A big cop like helps. I'm over the target with exactly Pepe. Whereas you are making right, you're forcing them to consider why they have chosen. It's just for economic reasons, which does make sense. So many people are already going there. Why should we spend more money? Well, and it makes sense. It's the most likely explanation. Probably true. But that means that then this is an issue of mismanagement or competence because it is inexcusable that because as of right now, their plan is that it will not be fully excavated. It will not be excavated any of our lifetime. And there could potentially be answers involving our ancient past and Göbekli Tepe, and it is entirely inexcusable. In my opinion, that's more reason to go there. But did you show Jamie? Yes. It does say the thing about things that might have been by translation. Don't start close about how soldiers were to excavate things like that. It meant the first one, 150 grand was put out. 2014 was the same article. Just the thing that says unlimited amount of research funding, but it's funding, a lack of funding, right below it. Okay. Let me just say this. All they gotta do is drill a hole, camera to figure out if it's lava, something made. It's not expensive to be done for thousands of dollars, not millions of dollars. And if it is a 27,000 pyramidal structure, as Grant Hancock has the data is not but then he just personally don't know potentially on Earth. And we're never going to look until we go looking. And it is entirely unacceptable. We're not doing it. What happens is like much real, but fortitude very real. There's a thing with paradigm. Look at it for a very long time. Is the origin of person history were expected to bear out the Bible. Then Darwin, then it was gradually wrong. There is no major global. And gradually, everything that's all in the record, and that lasted from the late 17th all the fucking up till before that was no such what they call it now, which is the way the fucking world happens outside of sometimes it's cars and big chunks of this is so brain in the life normally and every now and again traffic happens. The point is they think that something is going to change a paradigm that they're not fucking of opposite state to turning paradigms like they like that. Point was on here and you tried to put that one down. I don't even know that, but one thing you almost never hear mentioned was what was two before that it was and many people did American were people before and they found it it's not some novel time of well you know it was scientific debate operating procedure which always fucking been done so it's not a thing right it's just control always experts coming out counters their control and their they reject it. Just it's messed up because I mean I know scientists people but that should all be what we when new information comes along okay now we're thinking about it but the problem is books and these books they we now know we are sure that what are your thoughts on the pyramid? How do they pyramid? They date the pyramid based on whatever carbon that they could find, which between stone. Obviously, you can't carve it in the house. So you have to use some sort of organic material around.
The best great around 500 years ago. These stones, you could argue that the stones were even the Romans are some things. Um, I don't know how Great Pyramid is. It was constructed 500 years ago, and our understanding of what's happening at that time is vastly different than people that were spoken wearing lots of barefoot pyramid. And that's
Well, even that's
right.
a bunch of guys with sandals pulling a sled.
So that my grandma's older, that one statue was 58 metric tons.
Only?
Yeah.
The other
Well, they put on a sled, a wooden sled. And I'm like, the Ramesses statue is 15 times heavier than that other one. Yeah, this is what they always show. They always show these naked, yeah, look at a bare ass.
Oh.
So, just to be clear, I know. But it's something that they're dumb and primitive. That's why.
That's clothes on. Look at
Right.
That's kind of right. They found that when they studied remains that were in the enclosures where the people that worked here live, they're not slaves. No, they fed well. Yeah, they're fed well, and it seems like they were highly skilled. They had
Clearly.
people most impressive about it is the accuracy itself. It's like a perfect square with like 2 inches per side. That's like only a fraction of the top. On the fucking back. Right. Only up with like if you had a function full of light, a magnifying glass that start a fire, by no matter what. Calibrate that. You have to have everything back in something target build up a perfect goes back range. That kind of work rope. Rope tag by 100. That's not pretty much I'm not this perimeter. Right. There's an outline around the pyramid where it's scratched around where they would think that they water and stuff to do levels. And measure that. In any deviation, even in millimeters, with each rock, get up 300,000 stones, build the pyramid. Any deviation side would fuck the whole thing up. Oh man,
it is virtually perfect. Not quite perfect.
Well, it's made by humans. Allegedly. On and on. Do you know the on and on is the most fun? It's I love such stuff. The funnest possible that human genetic by a superior race find gold. I was telling Jim last night, archaeologists refer to the Clovis hypothesis. I like to tell him stuff is more elegant. Why we that's all of the entire world. Gold. You can't make tools out of it, weapons out of it, yet it's the most prized metal. And it works get to a higher level. That's all this stuff. It's useful, isn't it? Very useful. Also, right. But say that fucking a lot of people live choose from the shape put on the earth. Climate area. I don't right. I don't like talk about doing that. How about our global where there's one actual crazy goes 95?
He didn't create anything. He bought the patent off that IBM guy. I love putting that up blast. Like, I think he suffers from an inferiority complex. I think he's jealous of Elon Musk and others. I think his time in the light
is short as Tesla.
Yeah, it makes him massive. I think that he is, look, once the richest man on earth, and now he's not, and I think that that's all he wants. I think
power, and especially have enormous resources control over it. You don't want to that grip.
Yep. Okay. Like, bro, he's all inclusive running check. Made it, brother. You're
right. You should be living like Jeff Bezos.
Right. Yeah.
Let's go. Yeah. That's what I want out of my business. I want people criticize. Like, what the fuck? The dream. Jack. This hot girlfriend. I got. Oh, she got one. I can't fucking dick rocket.
I can't figure out why he runs the Rothschild. He owns the Rothschild. Well, has he?
Yeah. Big deal about it. Article that we have to really brother. He wrote it essentially saying that you have to take version. You have to take a bunch of different perspectives. You can't left wing echo chamber. The reason why they're faltering. I mean, all of these. I was just reading something about CNN rating and MSN rating post-election. They cracked. All these left on YouTube are hemorrhage subscribers. You guys are out of touch. They're not accurate. People are speaking with their subscription. Speaking with their purchase of the Washington Post versus the New York Times. The New York Times is debunked in the most insane way. Debunked RFK Jr.'s assertion that the ingredients in fruit are different in Canada than they are in the United States. They fact checked while saying he was accurate. Their fact check is so dumb when you see the fact check is so dumb because the fact check says it's not correct. They have the same ingredients except for the what the fuck? Mr. Kennedy as an example of a product with many artificial ingredients. Question why the Canadian version has fewer than the U.S. version. It was wrong. The ingredient list is roughly the same, although Canada's has natural colorings made from blueberries and carrots, while the U.S. product contains red dye for L5 and blue 1, as well as phenylated hydroxy or lab-made chemical that is used for frying. According to the ingredient label, the fucking chemicals banned in Canada that we're trying to use in America. That's saying he was. That makes like enough for and then you talk about, right? I don't know what that's about. The hemorrhage. Of course. Brain nuts. And also, what is your motivation? What's your motivation for potentially harmful and toxic chemicals? What is greater health of the population? We're saying that these are eliminated in the country because they've been proven to be dangerous. What is your motivation? Wrong.
Well,
What else? Ideology, left-wing rejection of now he's connected to Trump, connected nuts. It's like you go down this weird rabbit hole. Like, what are you trying to do? Are you trying to remove all left of credibility? Are you trying to eliminate because you lost so much credibility? Are you trying to kill it all? Are you secretly working for the Chinese? What are you?
They're all like probably backed by Monsanto or something. You look at like cereals.
That's what it is. Honestly, I think that like this, our father's generation, that's what they consider 10 tough. That's fucking. I'm hoping that what Jeff Bezos said, the Washington Post, and I know what CNN is considering doing, and they've made some sort of a trend towards a more objective form of journalism, but they're still compromised by their sponsors, compromised by the advertising, and so compromised that they're lashing out at all the other people that aren't digging their own grave. You guys are
they're doing it themselves, and now it's like journalists. How does Elon Musk start out with journalists? Misquoting, but
that is the mainstream. That's where most people are doing.
The view speaks for itself. You know,
it's not just actually fact check. You have all these live debate real time online about what's going on. And you're finding all when they Twitter. But Jesus Christ, the FBI is involved? Fucking crazy. The FBI is real. And you're a journalist? You're banning science?
Yeah, it's bad for society. Reparable harm with
But ultimately, you can't trust. They said, well, honest. There's a lot of money honest. This was great. All these journalists, well, we don't have a giant Atlanta that's 1,000 workers, right? We don't have the overhead. We're terrible. Terrible rating and a massive overhead. Like, you're kind of fucked. That's great. That is the rise of guys like Matt or independent, Glenn Greenwald, all these types of people, Michael Schumacher, people that you can actually trust that can tell you the truth. Because I'm telling you the truth.
yes,
Great business model.
it's corrected. And Tucker Carlson and many others.
Yeah. Jersey enforcement. And the problem is, they've dug their so much, and they'll write articles like that New York Times article. They're so crazy. Oh, congratulations. Here's what it looked like. They changed it. They got busted. Oh, they got like 10. Yeah. Why do they have a double thing? They said here, why do we 19 ingredients cannabis premium? One count. Rough thing. There's still whole point. So the ingredient count is roughly the same. So there's still 19 ingredients in the Canadian version, but it's not just like sugar and wheat and like carrot dye and blueberry dye and whatever the fuck else they have. The factual error is right. What he's saying that all these things dyes are all illegal in other countries.
Poison. Really one of the worst things.
But I wonder if it's crazy or colored. Fuck it. Whatever. Red dye problem with a lot of kids that have like that kind of rough red dye. Well, I mean, sure, this left alone on device like I was. Whole I was after crunch until I had a fucking heart attack.
Lucky Charms, you get the marshmallows.
Yeah, like where is it? This is Saturday morning cartoon. Yeah. Oh my god. I can't crack bowls of sugar high. Yeah, I mean, we didn't even know that sugar was bad for you. Again, another fucking conspiracy that turned out to be true. The scientists got bribed the sugar industry to saturated fat. That's when everybody started using margarine. Shit. Oh, he's plastic.
I love it.
Margarine now.
I was finding that you can get the answer for butter, but they won't touch margarine.
Brother, they don't fucking margarine.
Something to be said for that. Oh. Yeah.
Here. For me. Oh. We're so fucking well, like the mentioned before, the experiment they did back after everybody was wondering here in the States why the Nazis were able to break it file full of fucked up stuff. They got guys on that. They had an actor pretend to talk to test subject, real test subject, quote unquote shocking that guy. And the guy in the lab took more, and they found about 30% of the people. And that kind of appeal to authority, that kind of worship is they're cutting it right now, and they're paying the price. This danger authority massive information, educate people. It's foster crazy, especially when it comes to something, which is why your channel's so popular. Your channel and Grant Hank are popular, and why people that want to hold on to that throne are so adamant about labeling it every possible horrible pejorative. Yeah. But yeah, it's a real way to, like I said, authority. Like we're talking about. We're talking about maybe legacy falling apart. When I mentioned about Fire, or about the apocalypse, that was, I think it was actually a Wall Street Journal article, but it was a legacy thrown about people. I think it's not under the bus. Reading everything else, especially black people and creators across the board. Some about it. I think it's actually drunk bands on X. Yeah, I think a sign of culture also after the election. There's a real well, you're right. The number one platform on it's the trying to put that guy out. But crazy, like he's got more money than anybody, and he's like, twice before it. They're like, Twitter has lost $20 billion in value. It's a terrible businessman. No, he overpaid. He overpaid. Yeah, it was not. This was what you call an activist. Well, he's just a rare cat who's willing to do that. There's not a lot of people that are willing to like see it. He got $2 billion. Like, fuck it. This apple cart. I'm so glad on the right side of his. Oh my god. Hero X t-shirt. That is the platform on Earth. That's his goal, right? Yeah. Well, it's or probably will grow and other things. One of the guys. You know, I saw that his brains brought out. I've been thinking on all of my friends in the real world that were laughing. Name of the I did Rumble when everybody was the right wing was going to Rumble, ha 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 ha. Now it's like, oh, you guys are the bluest guy, ha 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 ha. It's fucking funny how that works. Yeah, shout out to Rumble. Rumble's the Chris Pavlov. Shout out to Bill Rumble. I had the pleasure of meeting him, and he's been treating me real good. Rumble's great. Yeah, they're fantastic. Yeah, put on free speech from the left or the right, whatever it is. Anything I want. Anything I want within, I'm talking about violence like that. So I recommend it. It's what it's supposed to do. And that just supposed to apply. This is one of the great things about this administration coming in is that Donald Trump wants to apply the First Amendment to all these sites. All this big tech thing, which is, by the way, was terrible for him in 2020. It really, it's election truly. You're eliminating one complete side of the argument. One side thinks this, the other side thinks that. They get together and discuss it, and the person outside of it gets more compelling argument. And the wonderful thing about community is you that's what bullshit. Let's find out what's right and what's wrong, what's true, what's not. That's what it's supposed to be. The problem with that is then you control the election, and that's they don't control. You get beyond saying here's $10 million, and working. No one cares. No one believes. Trust them. They make terrible life choices. You know, like literally, not a person come out of listen to motherfucking. Right? I mean, I wasn't sitting Eminem down like a political scholar, and like tell me what you know about the invasion of Ukraine. What do you know about the 2014 about NATO moving weapons closer and closer? What do you know about the violation of the treaty? What the fuck are you doing, man? You shouldn't be doing this. It's not the thing for you to be doing here. These people have no idea what they're talking about. They're people that don't do research on their own, and they're just told with. Well, I think they were getting paid, and I think that's weird. You're allowed. Great. Yeah, over 2.5 million. Not a million. They thought now it's 2.5 million. That's like what sort of that. But the weird ones are if it's true, then you know this it's unclear where they burned all the money. And then there's also the money that went to these activist groups. And we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars they paid people to support this administration. It's kind of supposed to be the other way around. Aren't these groups supposed to be paying money to prop up the campaign believe them? No, you're paying activist groups to support you, which is just crazy. Also, it didn't work.
It didn't work at all.
Like, you went through $1 billion plus in 3 months. This is so crazy, and you're in debt.
I think a lot of people made some money in the process. That money went somewhere. Where is it now?
Part of the problem. Climate change is part of the problem with everything that it's profitable to spit out a narrative. And there's a lot of money now, and this is money in politics. And as much as we get that out, and I think one of the most important things about getting that out is the whole thing about pharmaceutical drug companies, the advertising, which changed in the 1990s. You have to realize that before the 1990s, pharmaceutical drugs could not advertise on TV. Yes, we were taking way less, and we were way healthy. Not good, folks. This is not good. You know, and other than epic, like curbing certain extent, what are these drugs are doing? Like, if you look at the overall health, it's declining. Obesity is rising. Heart attacks are rising. Strokes are is bad. We're not moving in the right direction, and yet there's tremendous resistance. What's funny to me, this election, it's kind of clear that when one person's platform is this, the other person's platform is not. I mean, that's like that's like a right. Okay, liberally, you teach in with the platform, not Trump. So, okay, well that's great, but I mean, once people have pierced through the veil of Trump's going to make everything illegal, put everybody that's not white, and once they got past that, what do you have? Also, if you're going to develop real, I think you would want to do that over a long period of time. Very careful about treat it like a defense. Like if you're prosecuted as you would want to have facts that show that you're correct, have all of your arguments. You don't want to have mock comes to you. That's not the case. Why that's not the case? You don't want to have all your ducks in a row. It's like a fighter that's last minute fight. They've been around for years and they haven't gone through a 10-week like don't do it. You're not ready. Right? And if your only strategy is like a wild punch, which is basically he's a liar. Like people are lying about him every fucking day. It's a fucking all the thing about taking Liz Cheney and executing her. Right. You guys are lying. And you're saying he's a liar, but yet you're lying all the time, and you're doing it like 1995, and there's no social media. But you can't do that anymore, especially when the people that are paying attention to the podcast, well, guess what? Podcasts are 100 times bigger than anything you guys have, and people listen to that, they know you're full of shit, and then your numbers decline even further. And so I think they were saying that CNN, how much is CNN down? So CNN is it's hard to know whether or not they're, it's hyperbole or whether or not it's fact. But they were saying CNN's ratings are down like 10% of it, and MSNBC, they got rid of Brian Stelter, they brought him back.
So odd. I'm like, I'm looking forward to this.
I mean, they don't have any talent.
They're all going out of business. They're going to have to rebrand. They're going to have to get entire new management. Like, I'll never watch those programs and those networks, but literally never. Like, they're dead to me now.
It's propaganda. It's a decent percentage of it's propaganda. That's unacceptable. That's unacceptable if you're the voice of the world. It's unacceptable for you to have a large percentage of what you're saying. Things happen of attack. Tulsi Gabbard the last time around when she fucking nailed Kamala in the debate. Like, you can stand here and say all kinds of bad. You got hundreds of people in jail and leftists. There's still ending. And then Trump slump ratings crash. Here's why. What's the number? Say the ratings Rachel Maddow show, for example, is the MSNBC operated program that only airs once a week through just 1.3 million viewers on November 10th, 5 days after the election, a drop of 1 million viewers from the month before. In the key 25 to 54 demographic, the advertising most covet, Maddow's numbers mark the smallest her show has seen. Her show is April of 2022, and she's the number one show. Like, I only got a million shows. Hannity nearly quadrupled her, was born in 20,000. Her meager 109,000. But 109,000 people, 25 to 50. Yeah, so that's a bunch of old cat ladies.
And airports.
Yeah, airports. Right. Outside of Maddow, MSNBC unprecedented one. The really bad thing. What is that? For example, on Tuesday, November 11th, a week after the election, NBC attracted its for demo rating in 23 years. Over on CNN, the demo number was the lowest in 27,000. Overall week for 6 to 13 Fox wide, Poultry 550,000, CNN 309,000. Money scroll back up. Back Fox saw viewership jump by 38% overall since November 5th. After dominating election night by all networks drawing more than 10 million viewers. So bad that MSNBC Joe Scarborough and Eva Herrera crawled to Mar-a-Lago on Friday to kiss the rain, drawing storm for their utter shamelessness after years of on-air attacks.
Let me just not including that on Rumble, Dan Bongino and Steven Crowder had the number one and number two being on all election nights. So they're just mentioning mainstream networks. They're taking out the fact that
what did Dan Bongino
over 500,000 full-time live and Steven Crowder was pretty terrible. They were the number one, number two platforms in the world.
What is CNN?
I'm not sure. Way less. Yeah. Look it up.
I would agree that online they were the highest. World watching, and maybe that night was less than 500,000.
Maybe it's online streaming I'm referring to.
It must. Didn't say Fox the highest ratings? 5.5 million.
Online. I'm saying like the 4-year-old.
So they dominated online.
Okay.
So either way, this is what happened after 2016 as well. When they're or 20 right there, out of office, can't complain about Trump anymore. Your ratings crash. Your entire business operated on.
Yep.
Oh, the Orange Man.
And hatred. I mean, let's be real. There's nothing to.
Oh, I hate him. Like I couldn't even read just to laugh. Plays. Watch that later. Like, what the fuck? Because she's talking about an entire part of her program comparing Stalin, Hitler, and in MSNBC compared the rally in Madison Square Garden to the Nazi rally in 1930. Well, they were almost saying, I performed at Madison Square Garden, so must be a Nazi. But, obvious what I had. Here we are.
And you just had a guy on your show talking about the swastika on 5 continents around the world. Years ago. Let me just say this. I encourage everyone to go watch. Everyone go watch Apocalypse. Think for yourself. But one last thing to mention about that is that John aired Ancient Apocalypse associated with. I'm not kidding. This was a week ago?
Yeah.
Disgusting.
He's talking about archaeology, canary and coal mining. You can tell that because you see the war that happened before 9/11, and therefore they're connected. And Sandy Hook right around the same time as the 2012 thing. It's just like, dude, Alex Jones can ice your buddy. You're gonna get fucking sued. Shut your mouth about Sandy Hook, man. The same thing that they do. The same thing Clinton did. Connecting it to white supremacy plan. We're at 3 hours plus in.
Okay.
Cheated world.
All right.
I love your video, and I don't understand Randall's to very fascinating details, and your videos that detail reshot structure, which is an incredibly great structure. If it's not man-made, and if it wasn't at one point in time, it's some sort of a structure that's made by human beings.
It doesn't. So this is one of the things Randall says was the natural Atlantis. I'm like, well, who built Atlantis? He said it was God Poseidon. Well, was Poseidon an actual individual? The ancient Greek translation for Poseidon, I think, is modern day translation for Mother Nature, and humans on natural features throughout history to bring up the structure. No other place on Earth. It is a mysterious site. The best consensus is that it's volcanic in nature and it's a collapsed volcanic dome, but it doesn't match anything else anywhere else on Earth as far as volcanic domes. It matches more than a dozen similarities of the most consequential similarities to what Plato had described lost city of and it's made up of concentric circles. If it had water, it physically matches 3 of water and 2 of land. It's made up of red, black, white color stone. There's an abundance of gold in Mauritania. Elephants described as being on Atlantis. You won't find gold or elephants in rivers like Randall. It also has an opening in the south. Matches the description of Atlantis. There's mountains to the north, which just so happen to be called the Atlas Mountains. They're in modern-day Morocco. Well, Atlas, which is a very unique name, was said to be the very first king of Atlantis. The name of the very first king in Mauritania, which is where the Rishon structure is located.
Covered in salt.
Yes, the water was there. And there's another similarity that Atlantis was said on those mountains that were said to be to the north, which are again happen to be in the Atlas Mountains. Well, there was a river that was said to be flowing from those mountains. There's a scientific study that the Amon-Risset River.
It's absolutely possible. All you have to do is just have different devices, period. I'm not a bot, I'm a real person. Period. I share my camera, and I would share my camera in this Discord as well, but I'm not allowed.
And it's in the same spot. And it's in the mountain.
Yep.
I mean, whatever that is, it's weird. Yeah, if you like Atlantis, what the way it was described, that seems like a very good spot for it.
And let me tell you something. A lot of people think, well, it's not an island, so it's not the Atlantis. But what they leave out is the fact that the ancient Greek word for island was Nesson, which implied one of which was island. The other was promontory, peninsula, as well as land and continents surrounded by lakes, rivers, or springs, which matches the structure. So it's like, a lot of people, and this, a lot of people that I think all areas studied, I'm not debunking the. However, the fact that it's the Sahara Desert and that the Egyptians are the ones that came up with the tale of Atlantis, that's where it originates.
Yes, you can, period.
Well, Egypt and the Sahara,
all you need to do is log in with your account on a different device, period. You can be in multiple VCs in different servers, period. You can't be in multiple VCs in the same server, though.
All night with English language spoken all over. When where are all these people coming of Antigo? Makes far more sense that it in that region of the world.
How much work is done?
None. Zero. There's gold in the Mauritanian desert, and they don't want anyone touching it. Very inhospitable. It's 50 miles inland, and it is. I know people have gone out there, and it is a full place, water. It's hard to get to. You can have all the money in the world, you can die out there.
It's not hard to get to, but and not just inhospitable. It's kind of war-torn, kind of fucked up, kind of the kind of place where you're not gonna have to worry about some forest on you that's gonna take you. Right. So it's a lot of reasons going there, but it's really I'm a lot more skeptical. So I do believe in a lost civilization, and I think it's really interesting to find so many of the same things in the same race. Just like Jim says, when the stones throw away, really, that it would make sense that they would have that package of it so accurately recorded and to find it right there. It, it definitely is one of the things I harp on my channel all the time. There's more on it. Definitely the kind of thing we need real scientists to go out there and do. Don't you guys knee jerk and say, well, Atlantis, so fuck that noise. We don't need guys to say it's definitely Atlantis. Don't we need ground archaeology. Oh fuck. Let me this one really quick. If I can do this really fast. The African
on your show, he said he's like, not only did Atlantis exist, they were black.
African supremacists. The way that these guys attach the white supremacy thing is they go back to guys from the 1800s on Atlantis that had some cool views on race. Now they believed in the biblical race. The way the biblical race is something you'll never find John Hoover will tell you because it ducks their entire argument.
Frankly, it's not your business, period. I have a lot of devices.
After the flood, around one of them laughs at him.
I am an app developer.
White people, that was of race for up until about 100 years. So, 200 years ago, the guy writes about Atlantis, I thought it was Aryan Atlantis. Aryan after Noah, there was no return. So before the flood, there was no Aryan. So anytime somebody says that all these old school shit believes in everything, all you do is scratch the surface and find that's not the case at all. I didn't believe in a white Atlantis. Connolly did not believe in a white Atlantis. Despite Clint Dibble making sure to name drop that fucker anytime he gets a chance. But they're going to make sure you think that. They're going to eliminate because of the people racism that people don't know much about.
Listen, let me just say this one point. I don't care what their color their skin was, but the legend comes from Egypt and they're fucking brown. Go get fucked with your racist argument. I don't care. Like, anyway.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's been a lot of fun. Joe, really been fun. Jimmy, always good to see you.
Good to see you guys.
Very nice to meet you. Thank you for your channel, both of you guys. Fantastic. Team King, Bright Insight, awesome channel.
Follow me on X, Rumble, and Instagram. Love you all.
I'm going to be at the Cosmic Summit speaking in the summer.
I do, period. I am live on 8 different YouTube accounts at this very moment, period. I don't want to self-promote that. But just in case you're aware, comma, I do use all of the accounts.
Springs, Colorado, Billings, and Missoula, Indiana, Columbus, Ohio, Illinois, over there, the Fighting Illini area, Grand Rapids, Lafayette, Louisiana, and Beaumont, Texas. You can call your ticket at TFON.com/TOR. Thank you so much for this. I want to start by saying that we have reached out to Governor Walz and Vice President Harris, and we would love to have them in the studio as
Yo,
well.
what's up, Frosty?
Today's guest.
I got kicked out of the Yogi Discord, dog. I'll tell you in a second. Just a moment.
big question.
The answer is they didn't like that I streamed all the time, and that's just kind of how I do. Welcome, the boy. Hope you're doing well. So yeah, I was in there for like I don't know 48 hours, and they started to complain. And even though I was following all the rules of the server, supposed to do, and he's just like, yeah, well, you're not gonna stream it here all the time. I don't care what you think. And he kicked me out. That's whatever. But yeah, but I really liked it in there. But whatever. Not too much I can do about it. How's your day going?
Yeah, you could have told him. You could have maybe told him when you were like in file with whenever you needed to.
Yeah, well, they didn't like me, and that was very clear. They would put all kinds of rules on me that I had to follow that nobody else had to follow. And even though I did follow them, they just eventually were like, "Yep, you're done." And I was like, "Okay, well."
I don't know. I think you were like I don't know. Maybe they want to sleep. I guess and not all of a sudden they're on the spot.
That could have been.
Yeah, I think it might be that because they had a problem with that to begin with.
Well, it was more the fact they just didn't like me in there 24/7. Maybe I attracted different people, but they should want that as a server. They should want more people.
Yeah, it's no big deal. You should like get into more like channels and stuff because
That's a good
I feel
idea.
like
I should try to find
yeah.
another karaoke. I'm gonna I'm gonna take a look and see if there are any others, perhaps, that I can find and join, and hopefully they don't get mad at me.
I'm very cool that people were like kind of totally fans of the voice. I'm pretty sure they come with maybe they told you on that. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, it's very fun. Like, the majority of people on the internet are kind of like that.
people are just. I find it.
Following conversation, Graham, a journalist, author, over 30 years has explored the controversial possibility there existed a world civilization class and that it was destroyed global cataclysm from 12,000. He is the presenter of the Netflix documentary series Ancient. They recently discussed archaeologist Ed Barnhart. Let me say that Ed represents the kind of archaeologist, scholar, knowledgeable, humble, open-minded, and respectful. I'll do many more podcasts on history, the ancient artist impact.
Excellent. We'll see you in a bit, my man.
Exciting. let's start with a big foundational idea about humanity. That there was an advanced ice age civilization that came before, and perhaps what people now call the kernels of civilization: Mesopotamia, Egypt, India, China, Asia, Mesoamerica. So let's talk about this idea of the highest possible. It would be better to describe it as a foundational sense of excellence and in the story that we are taught about our past, which envisages more or less, there have been a few downs, but more or less straightforward evolutionary. Start out as foragers, then we become agriculturalists. The hunter-forager phase could go back hundreds of thousands of years. I mean, where it's also important to mention that anatomically modern humans were not the only humans. We had Neanderthals from 400,000 years ago to 40,000 years ago. They've been human because anatomically modern humans interbred with them, and we carry Neanderthal genes. There were the Denisovans, maybe 300,000 to perhaps even as recently as 30,000 years ago. And again, interbreeding took place. They're obviously a human species. So you've got this background of humans who didn't look quite like us. And then we have anatomically modern humans. And I think the earliest anatomically modern human skeletal remains are from Jebel in Morocco, date to about 310,000 years ago. So the question is, what were our ancestors doing after that? And I think we can include the Neanderthals and the Denisovans in that general picture. And why did it take so long? This is one of the questions. Why did it take so long when we have creatures who are physically identical? We cannot actually weigh and measure their brain wiring. So if we've been around 300,000 years at least, and if ultimately in our future was the process to create civilization or civilizations, why didn't it happen soon? Why did it take so long? Why was it such a long time? Even the story of anatomically modern humans kept on changing. I remember a time when it was said that there hadn't been anatomically modern humans before 50,000. Then it became 196,000 years ago with findings in Ethiopia, and then 310,000 years ago. There's a lot of missing pieces in the puzzle there. The big question for me in that, why didn't it take so long? Why did we wait until after 12,000 years ago, really after 10,000 starts the beginning, selected at the beginning of civilization in places like Turkey. Then there's a relatively slow process of adopting culture, and by 6,000 years ago, ancient Sumer emerging civilization. And we're then in the pre-dynastic period in ancient Egypt as well, 6,000 years ago, beginning to see definite signs of what would become the dynastic civilization of Egypt about 5,000 years ago. And interestingly, around about the same time, you have the Indus Valley civilization popping up out of nowhere. And by the way, the Indus Valley civilization was a lost civilization until the 1920s, when railway workers accidentally stumbled across some of I've been Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro. And these are extraordinarily beautifully centrally planned. Clearly, they're the work of an already sophisticated civilization. One of the things that strikes me about the Indus Valley civilization is that you find a skin-tight skin of an individual in a recognizable yoga posture. That's 5,000 years old. And the yoga posture is Vajrasana, which involves a real contortion of the ankle and twisting the feet back. It's an advanced yoga posture. So there it is 5,000 years ago. Then raises the question, well, how long did yoga take to get to that place when it was ready, so advanced 5,000 years ago? What's the background to this? China, the Yellow River civilization. Again, it's around about the same period, 5,000 to 6,000 years ago. You get these first signs of something happening. So very odd that all around the world
sudden upsurge of civilization about 6,000 preceded by what seemed like a natural evolutionary process that would lead to civilization. And yet, certain ideas being carried down and manifested and expressed in many of the civilizations. I just find that whole idea very puzzling and very disturbing, especially when I look at the radical break that takes place in not just the but the story of all life on Earth, which was the last great cataclysm that the Earth went through, which was the Younger Dryas. It was an extinction level event. That's when all the great megafauna of the Ice Age went extinct. After that event, that we start seeing what I've taken to be the beginning, first gradual steps towards civilization, out of the Upper Paleolithic, because it's defined the old end of the old Stone Age and into the Neolithic. That's when the wheels are supposed to be set in motion to start civilization. But what happened before that? And why did that suddenly happen? And I can't help feeling, I've felt this for a very long while, that there are major missing us. Said that I'm claiming to prove that there was an advanced civilization. I am not claiming. That is a hypothesis that I am putting to answer some of the questions that I have about prehistory, and I think it's worthwhile to inquire into those possibilities, because the Younger Dryas event was a massive global cataclysm, whatever caused it, and Ray just after we start seeing the signs.
So the current understanding in mainstream archaeology that after the Younger Dryas, when it popped up in different places of the globe, there's a lot of similarities, but it popped up independently.
Yeah, independently and by coincidence, those big civilizations that we all remember, the first civilization, where it started civilization in China, they all pop up at pretty much the same time. That is.
They don't pop up; they kind of they'll gradual settlements.
Oh, definitely.
And then there's different dynamics of how they build up, and the role of agriculture in that is also non-obvious, but it's just first they kind of settlement and stabilization of where the people are living, then they start using agriculture, then they start getting urban centers and that kind of stuff.
It seems like an entirely reasonable argument. Everything about that makes sense. There is no doubt that evolutionary progress, social evolution, taking place those thousands of years before where. But what's happening now? Really, I spent much of the late 1980s investigating the issue of the lost civilization. I wrote a series of books about it. But by 2002, when I published a book called Underworld, which was the most massive, most heavy book that I've ever written, because I was writing very defensive. By the time I finished that book, my wife Santa and I spent 7 years diving all around the world, looking for structures underwater, often led by local fishermen or local divers, anomalies underwater. By the time that book was finished, I thought actually I've done this story. I've walked the walk. I really don't have much.
has a lot of powerful features. AI is coding. It has captivated the attention, excitement of the programming and AI community. I thought excellent opportunity to dive into the role of AI. This is a technical conversation that is bigger than just about one code editor. It's about the future of programming and in general, the future of human AI collaboration, designing and engineering complicated and powerful systems. This is the Let's Frequent Podcast. Order. Please check out our sponsor description. Now, Michael, Wale, Arvid, and Aman. Alright, this is awesome. We have Michael, Aman, Wale, Arvid here. Cursor team. First up, ridiculous question. What's the point of a code editor?
So the code editor is largely the place where you build software. And today, or for a long time, that's meant the place where you text edit a formal programming language. And for people who aren't programmers, the way to think of a code editor is like a really processor programmer. Where the reason it's souped up is code has a lot of structure. And so the word processor code editor can actually do a lot for you that word processor is writing speed there. And so that's everything from giving you visual differentiation of like the you navigate around the base, sort of like your internet definition to error checking is hash rudimentary log. And so traditionally that's what a code editor has. And I think that what a code editor is as software.
Anything else?
That is very important. And it's actually sort of an underrated aspect of how we decide what to do. Like a lot of the things that we build and then we try them out. We actually prove them out. Because
The worst.
and so a big part of it like fundamentally I think where in other resources or ability, even the ability to get a large group together and that alone.
People don't know cursors. That's a be interesting. We're big fans of Go as a pilot. How did you arrive to Go?
Yeah. So I think a lot of us, all of us, hear them. Hear them. And at least for myself, it was that I really wanted to try it. So I wanted to get there, the only platform. And even though I really enjoyed the experience of guest code, it was good enough. And so that kind of
and maybe autocomplete. Anything just one or two. And there's a fun experience. Like when it's done well, there's an instant feeling. There's probably an instant, but feeling of like shit. Yes. Shit. Yes. And then there's an unpleasant feeling. There's that kind of friction. So I would say for a lot of people, the feeling gets powers.
I think actually one of the Copilot is that even when it's wrong, it's like a little bit annoying, but it's not that bad because you just type another character and then maybe you type another character and then so even when it's wrong,
Yeah, you can sort of iterate into this. I mean, the other underrated sort of co-pilot for me, first real AI product, so the first language model of consumer product.
Graph. Yeah. Yeah. Like the data was out.
Right. Okay. So what's the origin story of
So around killing off AI, and that was a moment where this where even if we didn't have any more, like you almost want to a few times.
by the way, probably talk 4 hours of healing process. So just summarize the paper and the paper and the better idea might be better. Model size and data size.
Bigger and better, predictably better.
Function.
Yeah. Yeah. But around that time, some of us there were like a lot of stuff about what's it look like, what's the story going to be for all these different launch worker fields, how they're going to be made better by this better. And then I think there were a couple of moments where like the theoretical things predicted in that paper started to feel really concrete, and it started to feel like a moment where you could actually go and PhD work on do useful work in AI. Actually felt like impulsive. And I think that's the first moment we already talked about a little bit, which was playing with a bit of Copilot. Like that was really magical. I think that's the next big moment where everything kind of comes together. It's actually getting early access for end of 2022 where model and definitely ability felt enormous. And previous to that, we had been working on projects we've been because of Copilot, because of our prior interests, we have been tinkering around that are like very specific, being for financial playing around with analysis. And then the stuff with GPT-4 felt like, look, not really free theoretical games that or felt like you could build a lot more at that point in time. And also, if we were being consistent, it felt like this wasn't just be a point thing. It's going to be all of programming that flows through the model. It felt like that demanded a different type of programming environment, a different type of programming. And so we set off to build that sort of larger business around.
There's one that I just remember. So my roommate is in an IMO Gold winner. There's a competition in the U.S. called the Platinum, which is the IMO for college people, and it's this math competition. It's exceptionally good. So Shenton and Juan, I remember, sort of June 2020 had this bet on whether the mod, like 2024 July, you were going to win a gold medal in the IMO with the like models.
IMO is International Mathematics.
Yeah, IMO is International Mathematics. And so Arvid and I are both, also competing in it, so it's sort of personal. And I remember thinking that this is not going to happen. Like, even though I sort of believed in progress, I thought, IMO gold, like Amon is just, that was the, and to be honest, I mean, I'm very wrong, but that was maybe the most prescient bet in the group.
The new results in it turned out that you were correct. That's what
It was technically
incorrect, but 1 point away. Amon was very enthusiastic about this stuff. Yeah. And before Amon like that he would walk around with it had the like charts and the formulas on it.
So you like felt the scaling.
Yeah, I distinctly remember there was this one conversation I had with Michael where before I hadn't thought super critically about it. And he kind of posed the question, why isn't scaling going to result in fast progress? I think I went through like the stages of grief. There was anger, denial, and then finally at the end, just thinking about it, acceptance. And I think I've been quite hopeful and optimistic about progress since. I think one thing I'll caveat is I think it also depends on progress. Like
math is a great domain because, especially like formal computer improving, because you get this fantastic signal of actually verifying it's correct. And so this means something like, oh, really well. And I think like you could have systems that are perhaps very superhuman in that.
Okay, so take it all the way to cursor. And what is cursor? It's a fork of VS and VS Code is one of the most popular editors of all time. Like everybody in love with it. Him, I love Mac for it. Sorry. The unified in some fundamental way the development communities. And then you look at the scaling laws AI and decided, okay, it's not enough to write an extension for VS Code because there's a lot of limitations to that. But if AI is getting better, really like how the AI is part of the editing I do for code and hard to put a lot of amazing field to talk about. But once that decision, like a lot of attention, including Copilot of VS Code that are doing of AI and stuff. What was it like?
The decision to do an editor in kind of self-evident to us for at least what because we started working on the editor. The idea was these models are going to get much better, they're going to improve, and it's going to entirely change the software. Both in a will have big productivity gains, but also radical and like active software. So you're very limited in the control you have for a code editor if you're plugged into a computing environment. And we didn't want to get locked in. We wanted to be able to just build the most useful stuff.
Okay, well then the natural question is, VS Code is kind of Copilot a competitor. How do you win? Basically just the speed and quality of the features.
I mean, I think this is a space that is quite interesting, perhaps quite unique, where if you look at previous tech waves, maybe there's kind of one major thing that happened and unlocked a new wave of companies. Every single year, every single model capability, or model capability, you now unlock this new wave of features, things that are possible, especially in programming. And so I think in AI programming, being even let alone makes your product much. I think Cursor a year from now will need to make the Cursor of today. And I think Microsoft has done a number of but I don't think they're great really in
Rapidly.
And push and kind of doing the research experimentation necessary to really push the ceiling. I don't know if I think of it in terms of feature sets. I think of it for programmers. It's that as the new model came out, I'm sure there's going to be more models of different types, like context and faster. Like there's all these crazy ideas that you can try, and 10% of the crazy ideas make it into something kind of cool and useful, and we want people to have that. Rephrase it like an underrated fact is reading it ourselves. When we started Cursor, we really felt this frustration that the models, you could see models getting better, but the Copilot experience had not changed. It was, man, guys, like the ceiling is getting higher. Like, why is it not making? They should make things that where's all the alpha features? There were no alpha features. Like, I'm sure it was selling well. I'm sure it was business, but it didn't feel. I'm one of these people that really want to try and do things, and they just for like a very long while.
Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know how you put that into words. I mean, compare Cursor with Copilot. Copilot pretty quickly started to feel stale for some reason.
Yeah, I think one thing that I think helps us is that we're sort of doing it all in. We're developing the UX and the way you interact with models, and at the same time as we're developing like how we actually make the models better answers, so, like how you build up the prompts, or like how do you find the context and or cursor think that helps a little bit, like sort of like the people working on the entire experience. Yeah, it's like the person making the UI and the person training the model like sit to like 18 feet away, so
Often it's the same person.
yeah, often you person. You can create things that are sort of not possible if you're not talking, experimenting.
And you're using, like you said, cursor to write cursor.
Oh, yeah.
Well, let's talk about something. Let's talk about the all-knowing, all-powerful staff. Autocomplete on steroids. So how does that work? What is that?
Highlighted high level. I'd say that there are two things that cursor is pretty good at right now. There are other things it does. But two things that it helps programmers with. One is this idea of looking over your shoulder and being like a really fast colleague who can kind of jump and type and figure out what you're going to do next. And that was the original idea behind, that was kind of the kernel of the idea behind a good auto predicting what you're going to do. You can make that concept even more by not just predicting the characters after your cursor, actually predicting the entire place you're going. And the second thing cursor is pretty good at right now too is helping you sometimes jump ahead of the AI and tell it what to do and go from the code. And on both of those, we've done a lot of work on ergonomics and also
One of the things we wanted was we wanted the model to be code for us. It was kind of a wish, and we had multiple attempts at it before we had sort of a good model that could edit. Then after we had a good model, I think there's been a lot of effort to make the inference fast or having a good experience. And we've been starting to incorporate, Michael sort of mentioned it, like ability to jump. And that jump to different places, I think intelligent models, like they're just like normal algorithms. There's no intelligence. There's like intelligence that went into designing the algorithm, but then there's no like this thing as you want to model. So I think the general question is like that these models are going to get much smarter. As the models get much smarter, the changes they will do are much bigger. So as the changes get bigger and bigger and bigger, humans have to do more and more verification. Yes, more hard. Like just you need to help them out. Sort of. I don't want to spend all my.
Can you say a little more across multiple files?
Yeah, I mean, so GitHub got solved, right? With code review. When you're doing code review, you're reviewing multiple different processes. But like Arvid said earlier, I think you can do much better than code review. You know, code review is kind of dumb. Like you spend a lot of time trying to grok this code that's often quite unfamiliar to you, and it often like doesn't even actually have that. I think you can significantly improve that review experience. Models, for example, using the kinds of tricks that Arvid described, that maybe pointing towards actually better. I think also if the code is produced by these models and it's not produced by someone else, like the code review experience is designed for both the reviewer and the person that produced the code. In the case where the person that produced the code is a language model, you don't have to care that much about their. You can design the entire thing around the reviewer so that the reviewer's job is as fun as production. I think that feels like the issue with kind of naively trying to make these things look like code. I think you could be a lot more creative and focus on it. And just one idea there is, I think it's ordering matters. Generally, are you have files and you're reviewing them tough problems, but actually, like you actually want to understand this part first because that came logically first, and then you want to understand the next part, and you don't want to have to figure out that yourself. Well, guide you.
And you go to more and more natural language versus
I think
sometimes I don't think it's going to be the case that all of the programming will be natural language. And the reason for that is, if I'm pair programming with Swallow and Swallow is doing, and sometimes if I'm like driving, I want to take this Swallow and hey, like implement a function, and that works. And then sometimes it's just so annoying to explain to Swallow what I want him to do, and so I actually take over the keyboard and I show him. I write like part of the example, and then it makes sense. And that's the easy thing to communicate. And so I think that's also the case for AI. Like sometimes communicate AI will show an example and then it goes and does the thing everywhere else. Or sometimes if you're making a website, for example, easiest way to show to the AI what you want is not to like what to do, but drag things around or draw things. And yeah, and like maybe eventually you move into like brain machine interfaces or anything like understand what you're thinking. And so I think natural language will have a place. It will not definitely not be a program.
I'm really I feel like there's a lot of machine learning going on. Tell me about something else.
Precursor really works via this ensemble of couple models that we train alongside the frontier models that are fantastic. And so Precursor Task is a great example of where you can specialize to be even better than else on the domain, which is kind of surprising that requires some kind of necessary and quite well, is plot. So I think these models are, like the frontier models, are quite good at sketching out plan code and generating like pain, but actually creating is quite hard. Frontier models, frontier training models, like you try to do this on it, O1, any frontier model, and it really messes up stupid things like counting line numbers, especially in super, super large files. And so what we've done is we let the model sketch out this rough code block that indicates change, and we train a model to then apply that change.
We just say that apply is the model looks your code, really damn good suggestion of what you think, and the seemingly trivial step of applying, you're saying,
Contrary to perception, it's not a deterministic algorithm.
Yeah. I think like you see shallow copies of apply elsewhere, and it just breaks like most of the time because you think you can kind of try to do some deterministic matching and then it fails, at least 40% of the time, and that just results in a terrible product. I think in general this regime of you are going to get smarter and smarter models, and like so one other thing that apply lets you do is it lets you use fewer tokens. This is both expensive in terms of latency for generating all these tokens, and cost. So you can get this very, very rough sketch, then have your small model go and make it much easier. It's very, very. I think that this regime will continue where you can use smarter and smaller models to do the planning, and then maybe the implementation can be less. Perhaps you'll have, maybe O1, maybe it'll be even more capable models, giving an even higher level plan that recursively applied by dominant entities.
Maybe we should talk about that.
Yeah.
Be like, Dax is always
yeah. Yeah. So one big maybe is speculative. So speculative edits are a variant of speculative coding, and maybe it'd be helpful to briefly describe speculative coding. With speculative coding, what you do, you can kind of take advantage of the fact that most of the time, and I'll caveat that when you're memory bound in language generation, if you process multiple tokens once, it is faster than generating. This is like the same reason why if you look at tokens per second, prompt tokens versus generated tokens, much faster tokens. So what we do is instead of using verify. With code edits, we have a very strong prior with, and that prior literally the exact code. What you can do, you can just feed chunks of the original code back into the model, and then the model will just pretty much agree most of the time that okay, I'm just going to spit that down. You can process all of those lines in parallel, and you just do this with sufficiently many chunks, and then eventually you'll reach a point of disagreement where the model will now predict text that is different from the ground. It'll generate those tokens, and then we kind of will decide after enough tokens match the original code to restart. What this actually ends up looking like is just a much faster version of editing. It's just like it looks like a much faster version of model rewriting code. So just we can use the same exact interface that we use for diffs, but it will just stream down a lot faster.
And then the advantage is that wireless streaming can just also be start reviewing the code before it's done, so there's no big loading screen. Maybe that is part of the advantage.
So the human can start reading things done.
I think the interesting bit here is something like speculation is a fairly common idea nowadays. Like not only in language models, and there's obviously speculation in CPUs, and there's like speculation for databases, speculation all over the place.
Let me ask this sort of the ridiculous question. Going on this better. GT, Quad, who wins in the context of programming? And I'm sure the answer is much more nuanced because it sounds like every single part of this involves a different model.
Yeah, I think there's no model that Pareto dominates others, meaning it is better in all categories that we think matter. Categories, speed, ability to edit code, ability to process lots of code, long context, a couple of other things, and kind of coding capability. The one that I'd say right now is just kind of net best is Sonnet. I think this is the best opinion. Our one's really interesting, and it's really good at reasoning. So if you give it really hard programming problem, you can do quite well. But it doesn't feel like it kind of understands your rough intent as well as like if you look at a lot of the other models, one qualm I have is it feels like they're not necessarily I'm not saying they train on benchmarks, but they perform really well in benchmarks relative to kind of everything that's kind of in the middle. So if you tried on all these benchmarks and things that are in the distribution of the benchmarks they're evaluated on, they'll do really well. When you push them a little bit outside of that, Sonnet's I think the one that does best at kind of maintaining that same capability. Like you kind of have the same capability in the benchmark as when you try to instruct it to do anything.
What another ridiculous question is the difference between the normal programming experience versus benchmarks represent? Like where do benchmarks fall short? We're evaluating these models.
By the way, that's like a really, really hard, like critically important detail how different like benchmarks are versus like real coding. For real coding, not interview style. You're doing, humans are saying like half broken English sometimes, and sometimes you're saying like, oh, do what I did before. Sometimes you're saying, go add this thing and do this other thing. The interview problems are very well specified. If you know on a specific, while the stuff is less specific.
No, I think that this benchmark question is motivated by what I just mentioned, and then also what Amon was getting into is that even if you there's a problem of like you between what you actually model in the benchmark versus real programming, and that can be actually real programming is like very messy and sometimes things that's why but then it's also doubly hard because of like benchmark, and that's both because like benchmarks are sometimes kind of focused on. Then it's like really hard to also get the data from the public benchmarks out of the models. And so, for instance, like one of the most popular like agent benchmarks, training data of these foundation models. And so if you ask foundation models to do a speed bench problem, you actually don't give them context in the case. They can like file path, they can write function name, and so it's also the public aspect tricky.
Yeah, like in that case, it could be trained on these literal issues or and maybe the labs will start to do a better job. Or they've already done a good job at decontaminating those things. They're not going to omit the actual training data of the repository itself. Like these are all like the most popular Python SymPy. I don't think they're going to handicap their model on SymPy and all these popular Python repositories in order to get true
I think that given the dearth and benchmarks, there have been like a few interesting projects that build systems with these models, or you build these models actually get something where they go in the right direction or not. And in a lot of places, people actually just have to play with things and get feedback on them. Like one or two foundation models, they have people. That's a big part. And so qualitatively, actually, in addition to like project else that
like the live
benchmark. Yeah, so you pull in the human vibe check.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean that's kind of what I do, like just like reading online forums and Reddit and X. Just like, well, I don't know how to properly load in. They'll say things like, I feel like Claude or I feel like, and then I sometimes feel like that too, but I wonder if it's model.
with Claude, there's an interesting thing I heard where I think AWS has different chips, and I suspect they have slightly different numerics than NVIDIA GPUs, and someone speculated that Claude integrated performance with maybe using the quantized version that exists on AWS Bedrock, whatever was running on Anthropic.
I interview a bunch of people about conspiracy theories stuff like spoke to the conspiracy.
Well, it's not it's very it's not they're like humans they're details, and you're doing like this squeezy monoblock, and chips are messy and you can have flux. It's hard to overstate
What's the role of prompt? You mentioned that benchmarks have really structured prompts. What should a human be doing to maximize success? Importance of all those called it a prompt.
Yeah, I think that
Tetherball hotline. Next time. Tetherball. shit. Yo, can you hear me? Yo. Right? I must have like a fucking million streams on at once. What the fuck? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Only 8. Maybe that bitch hasn't registered yet? Kids on the block. What if Ted Danson gets a plan like this? I don't like Ted Danson. This shit sucks. Everything about this is just the worst. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 fucking things? What is this garbage? So, father is fucked. No way this shit works. Amazing. Alright. Alright.
Depends on which model.
I take a whiz.
But I think the original EP4, original script model last year, they were quite simple. They also had a very so we have all of the information around it that would maybe be relevant in the prompt. You have the dog, you have the files that you have the conversation. And then there's a problem like how do you decide what actually in the prompt and when you have a limited and even for today's models, even when you have long context, filling out the entire context windows means that it's slower. That sometimes the model actually gets some models get more confused than others. And we have this one system internally that we call preempt, which helps us with that a little bit. And I think it was built for era before where we had 8,000 token context windows. And it's a little bit similar to when you're making a website. You want it to work on mobile, you want it to work on a desktop screen, and you have this uh, dynamic information, which you don't have, for example, if you're like designing a print magazine, you know exactly where it's. But when you have a website or when you have a prompt, you have the inputs, and then you need to format them to always work, even if it's this
it's really big, then you might have to cut it down. And so the idea was, okay, like let's take some inspiration. What's the best way to design websites? Well, the thing that we really like is React and the declarative approach where you use in JavaScript, and then you declare this is what I want, and I think this has higher priority or like this has higher Z index than something else. And then you have this rendering engine in web design. It's like Chrome, and in our case, the prompt renderer, which then fits everything onto. And so you declaratively decide what you want, and then it figures out. And so we have found that quite helpful. And I think the role of it has sort of shifted over time, where initially it was to fit small windows. Now it's really useful because it helps us splitting up the data that goes into the prompt and the actual rendering of it. And so it's easier to debug because you can change the rendering of the prompt and then try it on the prompt because you have the raw data that went into it. And then you can see did my change actually improve it for like
Did you literally prompt with JSX?
Yeah. So it kind of looks like React. There are components, like we have one component that's a file component, and it takes in like the cursor, like usually there's like one line where the cursor is in your file. That's like probably the most important. And so then you can get priorities for like that line has priority, and then you subtract one for every line that is farther away. And then eventually when it's rendered, it figures out how many lines can actually fit in it.
And you can do like other fancy things where if you have lots of code blocks from the entire code, you could use retrieval and things like embedding and string.
Whatever is the most natural thing for you. And our job is to figure out how do we actually retrieve the relevant things so that your thing actually.
Well, this is the discussion I had with Armin. Complexity. I guess the whole idea is like you should let the person be lazy.
Yeah.
But like that's a. But I feel like you're allowed to ask for programming, right? So like if they do what you want, I mean, lazy. There's a kind of tension between just being lazy, provide more as be prompted, almost like the system pressuring you or inspiring you, articulate.
Yeah.
Not in terms of the grammar of the sentences, but in terms of the depth of thoughts inside the prompts.
I think even as it gets closer to some level of perfection, often when you ask the model for something, you just are not enough intent is conveyed to know what to do. And there are like a few ways to resolve that intent. One is the simple thing of having models just ask. I'm not sure how to do these or to query. Could you clarify that? I think the other could be maybe if there are 5 or 6 possible generations, given the uncertainty present so far, why don't we just actually do all of those?
How hard is it for the model to out that sort of first? That's hard. Sort of like how to deal with uncertainty. Do I ask for more information to reduce ambiguity?
So, I mean, one of the things is like a recent addition is try to suggest files that you can add. So, and while you're typing, one can guess what the uncertainty is, and maybe suggest that like maybe you're writing your API, and we can guess using the width that you've made previously in the same file that the client and the server is super useful. And there's like a hard technical problem of how do you resolve it across all commits. Files are the most important given your current prompt. And we're still sort of an initial version is rolled out, and I'm sure we can make it much more accurate. It's very experimental, but then the idea is we show you like you just want to add this file, this file, this file also to tell the model to edit those files for you. If maybe you're making the API, like you could also edit the client and the server that is using the API, and the other one resolving the API. So that'll be kind of cool. As both there's the phase where you're writing the prompt and before you even click enter, maybe we can help resolve some of the uncertainty.
What degree do you use agentic approaches? I use for our agents.
We think agents are really like I think agents is like it's like it resembles sort of like it's sort of like this like you can kind of feel that it's like you're getting closer to AI, but a demo where it acts as a human would, and it's I think agents are not yet super useful for anything. I think we're getting close to where they will actually, and so I think there are certain types of tasks where having an agent would be really nice. I would love to have an agent. For example, if, like we have a bug where sometimes can't command C and command V inside our chat inbox, and that's a task that's super well specified. I just want to say like this does not work. Please fix it. And then I would love to have an agent that just goes off, does it, and then a day later I come back and
You mean it goes finds the right file?
yeah, it finds the right files. It like tries to reproduce the bug. It like fixes the bug, and then it verifies it. And this could be a process. And so I think I would love to have that. And then I think a lot of programming, like there's often this that over all of programming. I don't think we think that that's the case because a lot of programming, a lot of the value is in iterate or you don't actually want to specify something because you don't really know what you want until you've seen an initial version and then you want to iterate on that and then you provide more information. And so for a lot of programming, I think you actually want a system that's instant that gives you an initial version instantly back and then you can iterate super quickly.
What about something like the Everything Came Out Replit agent that does also like up development environment, installing software packages, configuring everything, configuring the databases, and actually deploying the app?
Yeah.
Is that also a set of things you know about?
I think so. I think that would be really cool. For certain types of programming, it would be really cool.
That within the person.
Yeah, we aren't actively working right now, but it's definitely like we want to make the programmer's life easier and more fun. And some things are just really tedious, and you need to go through a bunch of steps. And you want to delegate that to it. And then some things you can actually have an agent in the background while you're working. Like let's say you have a PR that's both back end and front end, and you're working on front end, and then you can have a background agent that does some work and figure out kind of what you're doing. And then when you get to the back end part of your PR, then you have some like initial piece of code that you can iterate on. And so that would also be
one of the things we already talked about. I wonder if we can linger on that some more in the various places. That technical details in this thing really fast. But every single aspect of the cursor, most aspects of the cursor, fast. Like I mentioned, the apply is probably the slowest.
it's a pain. It's a pain that we're feeling, and we're writing a big.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that I don't know. That well, I mean, that's actually shows that everything else is fast. Those are technical details about how to make some of those, how to make chat fast, how to make diffs fast. There's something that just
Yeah, I mean, so we can go over a lot of strategies. One interesting thing is, and so what you can do is, if as the user is typing, you can have, you're probably going to use some piece of content, and you can know that before you've done that. So, as we discussed before, reusing the KB cache results in lower latency, lower cost cross requests. So as the user starts typing, you can immediately warm the cache with, like, let's say the current file content. And then when they press enter, there's very few tokens it actually has to pre-fill before starting the generation. This will significantly lower.
Can you explain how KB cache works?
Yeah. So the way transformers work.
Like it.
I mean, one of the mechanisms that allow transformers to not just independently, like the mechanism works is you have at your current token some queries, and then you all the keys and values of the token, which are some kind of representation that the model of all the previous tokens in the prompt. And like by default, when you're doing a chat, model has to every single token do this forward pass under model. That's a lot of basic runs that happen, and that is really, really compelling. Instead, if you have already done that and you stored the keys and values, you keep that in the queue. Then when let's say I have sort of the last n token, if I now want to compute the output token, n plus 1 token, I don't need to pass those first n tokens through the entire model because I already have all those values. And so you just need to do the forward pass through that last token. And then when you're doing attention, you're reusing those values that have been included, which is the only kind of sequential part.
There like higher level caching.
I see. Yeah, there's other types of caching you can kind of do. One interesting thing that you can do for cursor tap is you can basically predict ahead as if the user would set the suggestion and then trigger another request. And so then you cache, so it's speculative, it's a mix of speculation and cache, right? Because you're speculating what would happen if they accepted it. And then you have this value that is cached, this suggestion. Then when they press tab, the next one you wait for them to be. It's kind of clever heuristic /trick that uses a higher level caching and can give it feels fast despite they're not actually.
And if you can make the KV cache smaller, one of the advantages that is like maybe you speculate more. Yes, here's 10 things that could be like predict the next 10, and then like it's possible the user hits the one of the 10, like much higher chance than the user hits like the exact one that you show them. Maybe they type another character in, sort of hits something else in the cache. But there's all these tricks where the general phenomena here is, I think it's also super useful for RL. Maybe a single sample from the model is very good, but you predict like 10 different things. Turns out that one of the 10 that's right, its probability is much higher. Pass it first, and part of RL like what RL does is you could exploit this passive K phenomena to make many different predictions, and one way to think about this, the model sort of knows internally has some uncertainty over like which of the key things is correct, or like which of the key things that we want. When we RL our cursor tab model, one of the things we're doing is we're predicting like which of the 100 different suggestions the model because it's more amenable for humans, like which of the humans more like another thing. Maybe like there's something where the model can predict very far ahead versus like a little bit and in the middle, and then you could give a reward to things that humans like more and sort of punish the things that it would like, and sort of then train the model to output the suggestion. You have these like RL loops that are very useful and exploit these passive features. Amon, go into more detail.
Yeah, it is a little different than speed. I was mentioning stuff about about reduced size for cache. There are other techniques that are so kind of back in the day, like all the way 2 years ago, people mainly use multi-attention. And I think there's been a migration for attention schemes like group query or multi-query attention. And this is really helpful for then with larger batch sizes, being able to generate. The interesting thing here is this now has no effect on that time to first token. So the thing this matters for is now generating tokens. And why is that? Because when you're generating tokens, instead of being bottlenecked by doing these super parallelizable matrix multiplies across all your tokens, you're bottlenecked by how quickly it's for long context with large batch sizes, by how quickly you can read the cache.
And so then that's memory bandwidth, and how can we make this faster? We can try to compress the multi-query attention is most compressed, where normally with multi-head attention you have some number of quote-unquote attention heads and some number of query heads. Multi-query just preserves the query heads, can't all of them. So there's only one value head, and with group query, you instead preserve all the query heads, and then for keys and values are kind of there are fewer heads, but you're not reducing it. But anyways, like the whole point here is you're reducing. There is Emily. Yeah, multi-latent. That's a little more complicated, and the way that this works, it kind of turns the entirety of your keys values across all your heads into this kind of one latent vector that is then kind of expanded. But and the latent it's quite an interesting algorithm. Maybe the key idea is in both FGA and in other places, what you're doing is sort of reducing the number of heads. The advantage you get from that is there's less of them, but maybe the theory is that you actually want a lot of different, like you want each of the keys and values to actually be different. So one way to reduce the size to one big shared vector for all the values, and then you have smaller vectors for every single, so that when you can store only the smaller, some sort of like low rank reduction, and the low rank reduction will at the end of the time want to compute the final thing. Remember that like your memory that like some compute that can expand the latent vector back up, and somehow like more yes, reducing like for example maybe like 30% like vector. Yeah, there's perhaps richness in having separate set of key values and
this shit
kind of sucks versus pressing it on that interaction.
And all of that is memory bound, and
yeah, the two things that maps do is you can now make your cache a lot more, because you less if you cache, you may cache a lot more aggressive, a lot more things. You get more caching, which are helpful for reducing the time per token, reasons I described earlier. And then the second being when you start doing inference more requests with batch sizes, you don't see much in as it's generating the token. But it also allows you to make your prompt bigger for certain. Yeah. So it's like the size of your baby cache is the size of all your prompts multiplied by the number of prompts. So you could increase out of it, right? The batch size or the size of your prompts without degrading things of generating.
Alright, you brought up blog post shadow space. Code in the background. What's going on?
So to be clear, we want there a lot of background. We're experimenting with a lot of right now. We don't have other than like the cache warming or like figuring out the right context that goes into your command key prompts, for example. But the idea is if you can actually send computation in the background, then you can help the user maybe like at a slightly longer time horizon than just predicting the next few lines that you're going to make, but actually like in the next 10 minutes, what are you doing? And by doing it in the background, you can spend more time doing that. And so the idea of the shadow workspace that we use it internally for like experiments is that to actually get advantage of doing stuff in the background, you want some kind of feedback to give back, because otherwise, like you can get higher performance by just letting the model think for longer, and so one is a good example of that. But another way you can improve performance is letting the model iterate and get feedback. And so one very important piece of feedback when you're a programmer is the language server, which is this thing. It exists for most different languages. There's like a separate language for per language, and it can tell you, you're using the wrong type here, and then it gives you an error, or it can allow you to go to definition for advanced structure of your code. Language servers are extensions developed by, like, there's a TypeScript language server developed by the TypeScript people, a Rust language server developed by the Rust people, and then they all interface over the language server for both. That your code doesn't need to have all of the different languages built in. Rather, you can use the existing compiler infrastructure. It's for linking. It's for going to definition, and for like the right. Yes, type checking is reference. And that's like when you're working in a big project, you kind of if you don't have that, it's really hard to code in.
Can you say again how that's being effective?
So when using cursor, then the idea is so that thing is and you want to do that in a way that doesn't affect because you want to do and so the idea behind the title workspace was like one way you can on a separate cursor. There is a and modify and then
But literal background, like
I could add and I think you want to and the user is making so that exactly mirrors the environment. And then on Linux you can do this cool thing where you can actually mirror the file system and have AI make changes to the files and it thinks that it's operating at file level, but actually that's stored in memory and you can create this kernel extension to work. Whereas on Mac and Windows it's a little bit more difficult, but it's a fun technical problem.
One maybe hacky but interesting idea that I like is holding a lock on saving. And so basically you could then have language model kind of hold the lock on saving the disk, and then instead of you operating in the ground truth version of files that are saved to disk, you actually are operating what was workspace, or at least unsaved things that only exist in memory that you still get lint driven for and you can code in. And then when you try to maybe run code, it just like there's a small warning that there's a lock, and then you kind of will take that lock from if you're trying to do currently, or from the shadow workspace if you're trying to do things currently.
that's such an exciting feature, by the way. But like to allow a model to change files, it's scary. But like be able to like let the agent do a task, and you come back the next day and kind of observe like it's a colleague like that.
And I think there may be different versions of runnability where for the simple things where you're doing things in the span of a few minutes on behalf of the user as they're programming, it makes sense to make something work in their machine. I think for the more aggressive things where you're making larger changes in longer periods of time, you'll probably want to do that in some sandbox. And that's another incredibly tricky problem of how do you exactly reproduce the point of it being effectively equivalent for running code the user environment.
I'm curious what kind of agents you want for code. Did you want them to find bugs? Do you want them to like implement new features? What agents do you want?
So by the way, when I think about agents, I don't think about coding. I think so. The podcast is video editing, and a lot of in Adobe, a lot of the code behind it's really documented code. Interact with, for example, code, and basically all the uploading, everything you could probably imagine. I do all of that through code, and translation, dubbing, all of this. So I envision automating many of the tasks that don't have to do directly with the editing. So that, okay, that's what I was thinking. But in terms of code, I would be fundamentally involved, but like many levels of bug finding, and also bug finding like logical bugs, not logical, spiritual bugs. Ones like big directions.
That's your point.
I mean, it's really interesting that these models are so bad. When it's nice, they're incredibly poorly implemented. Even the smart, exactly. Even O1. I think these models are a really strong reflection of the pre-training distribution, and I do think they generalize and loss gets lower and lower. But I don't think the loss, is quite, or the loss is low enough such that they're like really fully generalized. But, like the things that we use these things for, the frontier models that they're quite good at are really code generation and question answering. And these things exist in massive pre-training, but all of the code in GitHub just gets anything. And questions and answers, things like that. And so when you try to push anything that really don't exist very much online, like for example the version tab objective of predicting the next edit, given the edits done so far, the brittleness kind of shows. And then bug detection is another great example, where there aren't really that many examples of actually detecting real fixes. And the models just kind of like really struggle. But I think it's a question of transfer. Like in the same way that you get this fantastic transfer from pre-trained models, just on code in general, to the version tab objective, you'll see a very, very similar thing with generalized models that are really good at code to bug detection. It just takes like a little bit of kind of nudging in that direction.
Like to be clear, I think they sort of understand code really well. Like while they're being trained, like the representation stuff, like almost certainly, like somewhere in the stream, there's the model knows something sketchy going on, right? Or has some sketchiness, but actually eliciting the sketchiness, but actually like part of it is that humans are really calibrated on which bugs are really important. It's not just it's not just actually saying like there's something sketchy. It's like it's just sketchy trivial. It's sketchy like you're gonna take the server down.
Yeah.
Like part of it is maybe the cultural knowledge of like why is a staff engineer is good because we know that 2 years ago like someone wrote a sketchy piece of code that took the server down, and as opposed to maybe it's like this thing is like an experiment, so like a few bugs are fine, like you're just trying to experiment and get a feel of it. And so if the model gets really annoying when writing an experiment, that's really bad. But if you're writing something for production, you're like writing a database, right? You're writing code in Postgres or Linux or whatever, like your Linus Torvalds, you're like, unacceptable to have, and that's just having the calibration of like how paranoid is the user, like.
But even then, like if you're putting in a maximum paranoia, it still just like doesn't quite get it.
Yeah.
I mean, and that's hard for me to understand what line of code is not. Like I think one of your principles on a website says code can do a lot of damage. One should add a comment that say this line of code is dangerous.
And all caps.
No, you say like for every single line of code inside the function, and that's quite profound. That says something about the engineers involved, even the same person. I just forget how it can sink the Titanic in a single function. You might not that by looking.
Yeah, I think that one is also partially also for base AI models, where if you actually write dangerous in every single line, like the models will pay more attention to that, and will be more likely.
That's actually straight up a really good practice of labeling code of how much.
Yeah, I mean it's controversial. Like some people think ugly. Well, I actually think it's like in fact I actually think it's but I think there's certainly something where like it's useful for the models and humans just forget a lot and it's easy to make small mistakes. Gosh, like bring down like just bring down the server and like of course we test a lot and whatever, but there's always these things.
Yeah, like with normal doc strings, people they go, I know, and you kind of really.
Yeah, you have to keep in mind that they damage. It's like we don't really think about that. Think about, okay, how do I think how this works can
Until we have normal then you can do whatever you want and you know for certain.
Really, what do you think that future?
I think people just not write stuff and the model will suggest like you write a function, the model will suggest a spec and you review the spec and in the meantime smart reasoning gives a proof that implementation spec. And I think that happens for it.
Don't you think that a little bit of the stuff you're talking about both you specifying software, where sometimes it might be because the end is really hard to specify a focus then. Actually.
Like you think that spec.
Yeah, or just like or then I think there is a question of like can you actually do like that's like if that's possible I think like there. But then also
Even if how do you
figure out the spec? Is it written in
yeah, how do you map it? No, this is the spec.
How you do that? So then I think that you care about things that are not.
I see it. Yeah.
Maybe an argument against verification.
But there's this massive dog.
Replacing something like unit tests. Sure.
I think you can probably also hold spec language to capture some of they don't really capture it. Like I don't know. I think it's very thin.
and you're speaking not just about like simple function, you're speaking about entire code bases.
I think entire code is harder, but that's what I would love to have. And I think and because there's like a lot of work where you can formally verify down to the hardware. So like through you formally verify the C code and then you formally verify through the GC compiler and then the Verilog down to the hardware. And that's like incredibly big system, but it actually works. And I think big code bases are sort of similar in that they're like layered system and you can decompose it and formally verify each part. I think it's possible. I think this is a problem, but how do you handle that? Or how do you handle against external dependencies like calling like API? Try to spec.
But like you can't do this for everything. Like can you do this for everything you use? Like how do you do it for if there's a language model like maybe like people will use language models as primitives program, right? And there's like a dependence on it. How do you now include that?
I think it might be
what about like
I think it feels possible that you could actually prove that a language model is aligned, for example. Or like you can prove that it actually gives the right answer.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah.
If it's possible, or I have a dream. If it's possible, then it will certainly help. You know, making sure you don't that bug and making sure AI doesn't destroy all the population. So it's a full spectrum of AI safety. The models struggle with finding what's the hope.
My hope initially is, and I can let Michael speak to those things. It should first help with the stupid bugs. Like it should very quickly catch the stupid bugs. Like one errors. Sometimes you write something in a comment the other way. Like very I write less than in a comment like something like that. And the model is like, it looks sketchy. Like, do you want to do that? But eventually,
I think that it's also important to note that this is having good bug finding models still necessary to get to the highest reaches of having AI more and more programming for you, where you're going to, if AI is building more for you, you can not just but also verify. And without that, the problem about before the programming with these models will become. So it's not just for humans, like you write a bug, I write a bug for me, but it's also being able to verify the AI's code and it.
Yeah, and then how do you, like, we've had a lot of contentious dinners. How do you actually, like, one very popular idea, it's kind of potentially easy to introduce a bug and actually finding the bug, and so you can train a model to introduce a bug, existing code, and then you can train a reverse bug model that can find. So that's like one example, but yeah, there are lots of ideas.
You can also do a bunch of work, not even at the model level, taking the biggest models and then maybe giving them access to a lot of information that's not just like it's kind of a hard problem to get rid of files like first of all. And that's hard for humans often, right? Often you have to run the code, like this and here. There's whole other direction where like I tend to do that. And it could also be that there are kind of form factors here. It could be that you have a really special like fast kind of in the background. It might be that sometimes there are earlier examples about some nefarious input box. It might be that sometimes there's bugs, not just like checking my box is free or problem. I really want to solve it and you stack that with you're willing to pay $50 that bug or something.
Thought about like I would pay our money but generating code. I had a moment a few days ago. I started using Cursor for generating perfect like function for interacting with using API, give update, caption, and for localization like different. The API documentation is not very good. The code process, I googled it for a while. I couldn't find exactly a lot of confusing information. Cursor generated perfectly. I just sat back, I read the code, I tested it, it's correct. I want a button that goes $5. One that's really good. The other is that probably strong job. Right? There's a much stronger signal than just accepting. Right? It's like a strong good job. That and for bug there's a lot of people, that will pay a huge amount of money for a bug bounty thing. Right? You guys think about that?
Yeah, it's a controversial idea inside the company. I think it sort of depends on how much you believe in humanity. Almost, like I think it would be really cool if like you spend nothing to try to find a bug, and if it doesn't find a bug, you spend $0. And then if it does find a bug, and you click accept, then it also shows like in parentheses like $1, and so you spend $1 to accept the bug. And then of course there's the worry like, okay, we spent a lot of computation, like maybe people will just copy paste. I think that's a worry. And then there's also the worry that like introducing money into the product makes it like kind of, like it doesn't feel as fun anymore. Like you have to like think about money, and all you want to think about is like the code. And so maybe it actually makes more sense to separate it out, like pay some fee like every month, and then get all of these things for free.
It could be a component. It's not like
but it still has that like dollar symbol. I think it's fine, but I also maybe
Yeah, just the moment that feels like people do this is when they share it, when they have a fantastic example. There is also a potential world where there's a technical this like honor system problem too, where if we can get to a place where we understand the output of the system more, I mean, the stuff we were talking about with like, error checking the LSP and also running the code, if you could get to a place where you could actually somehow verify, oh, I have a bug, maybe then the bounty system doesn't rely on the honor system.
How much interaction there between the code, like how much information is gained from the code and terminal. You do like a loop that runs the code and suggests how to change the code if the code runtime is there. So right now there's world. Like I know you can like do okay inside the terminal. Not do it.
You can use terminal context as well inside of that command and everything. We don't have the looping part yet. So we expect something like this could make a lot of sense. There's a question of whether it happens in the foreground too, or if it happens in the background, like what we
sure backgrounds like running the code in different ways. Plus the database stuff. Not modifying the database, but okay.
I mean, there's certainly there's new API that is being developed for. It's not in AWS, but it certainly is. I think it's in Planet Scale. I don't know if Planet Scale was the first one you added. We already sort of add branches, which is like if you're working on a feature and you want to test against the broad database, you actually want to test against the broad database, you add a branch in the database. That is to add a branch and write a log. And there's obviously a lot of technical complexity in doing it correctly. I guess the company you I think like purpose buffer is going to add maybe branching to the write log, and so maybe the AI agent will use branching, like test against the branch, and it's sort of going to be a requirement for the branching.
It's really interesting if you branch a file.
Yeah. I feel like everything is branching.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like the problem with the multiverse. Like it's branch on everything, it's like a lot.
But there's obviously like clever algorithms to make sure that you don't have to use a lot of space.
Okay, this is a good place to ask about infrastructure. Mostly AWS. What are some interesting challenges? Why did you choose AWS? Why is AWS the winning hashtag?
AWS is just really good. Really good. Like whenever you use an AWS product, it doesn't know that it's like it might be absolute hell to go through the steps to set it up.
Why is the interface so hard?
It's just so good. It doesn't need
Nature of winning.
I think exactly. Yeah. But in AWS, you can always trust like it will always work. And if there's a problem, it's probably your.
Okay. Is there some interesting like challenges to this pretty new startup scaling like many people on?
Yeah, I think that there it's been an interesting journey, adding each extra zero to the request per second. You run into all of these with like the general thing for caching and databases run into bigger and bigger, and now we're at the scale where we get like like that. And then also there have been some systems that we built, like for system for computing a semantic index for codebase and answering questions about a codebase that have continued. I feel like been one of the things to scale.
I have a few friends who are super senior, and one of their sort of lines is like very hard to predict where systems will break when you scale them. You could sort of try to predict in advance, like something weird that's going to happen. Thought you thought through everything, didn't actually think. But I think for that particular thing, we've so what the for concrete details, the thing we do is obviously upload when like we chunk up all of your code and then send out sort of the code for embedding and embed the code. Then we store the embedding in a database, but we don't actually store any of the code. And then there's things around making sure that we don't introduce very hard like client bugs or much of the details of the server, like everything is encrypted. So So one of the technical challenges is always making sure that the local index, the local code base state, is the same as the state that is on the server. And the way technically we ended up doing that is, so for every single file, keep a hash for every file. And every minute, we try to download the hashes that are on the server, figure out what are the files that don't exist on the server. Maybe just created a new file, maybe just created a file to check out of the branch, and try to reconcile the server. But that introduces like absolutely enormous network overhead, both on the client side, and nobody really wants to hammer their Wi-Fi all the time. But also like like the enormous overhead of the database. It would sort of be beating tens of terabytes database, sort of approaching like 20 terabytes or something database like every second. That's just kind of crazy. You definitely don't want to do that. So what you do is you first try to reconcile the single hash that the root project. And then if something mismatches, then you go to find where all the children and see if the hashes match, if the hashes don't match, go look at their children and so on. You only do that in the scenario where things don't match. For most of the time, hashes match.
It's kind of like hierarchical.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, call them Merkle.
Yeah.
I mean, so yeah, it's cool to see that you can have to think through all these problems.
And I mean, the point of, like, the reason it's gotten hard is just because, like, the number of people using it, and some of your customers easily use our code bases to the point where we originally wrote our code big. I mean, it's not the size of a company that's been there for 20 years and ignore files, scale that across programmers. It's all these details where like building a simple thing is easy, but scaling it to a lot of people, a lot of companies, is obviously a problem. We're sort of independent of actually, so that's part of the scaling our current solution is also, coming up with new ideas, obviously for it, but then scaling all.
Yeah, and there are a lot of clever things, like additional things that go into that. For example, bottleneck in terms of cost is not something that your database is actually embedding the code. And you don't want to re-embed the code base for every single person in the company that is using that code, except for maybe they're in a branch with two different files, and they've made a few local changes. And so, because again, embeddings is a bottleneck, you can do one clever trick and not have to worry about like complexity like the other branches and the other databases where you just have some cache on the actual vector computed from that. And so this means that when the end person in the company gets the vector code base, it's really, really fast. And you do all this without actually storing any code on a service at all. Just store vector for vector.
What's the biggest gain this time you get from index code base? Out of curiosity, like what benefit does that have? It seems like longer term there'll be more and more benefit, but in the short term, just asking questions of the code base, what
I think the most obvious one is you want to find out where something is happening in your life, and you sort of have a buzzing memory of, okay, I want to find the place X, but you don't exactly know what to search for in a normal type search. As you ask the chat, you hit command enter to ask with a quick chat, and then very often the right.
I think, like you mentioned, in the future, I think it's only more and more powerful. We're working a lot on improving quality retrieval, and I think the ceiling for that is really higher.
have you considered, and why haven't you much done the local, where you do things like everything discussed is especially difficult to do, not to go to the cloud, you have to think about all these things, caching and large code bases with a large number of basic figure out all that. A lot of it where it just does stuff heavy computational stuff local. Maybe doing sort of embedding local.
Yeah, we thought about it, and I think it would be cool to I think it's just really hard. And one thing to keep in mind is that some of our users, the latest MacBook Pro, and like most of our users, like more than 80% of our users are in Windows 15, and many of them are not very powerful. And so local models really only on the latest, and it's also a big overhead to build that in. And so even if we would like to do that, it's currently not that great. And I think there are some people that do that, and I think that's great. But especially as models get bigger and bigger, and you advance things like bigger models, it becomes easier to do locally. Yeah, and it's not a problem with like bigger. It's just that, for example, if you're some big company code, just really hard to process big company code base, even Apple stuff. So even if it's not even a matter of like if you're just like a student or something. I think if you're like the best programmer at a big company, you're still gonna have a horrible experience if you do it locally. You could do it, grade 5, but like again, it's not fun anymore.
Yeah, like an approximate nearest neighbors and massive code bases. And that's just that. Like, let's talk about like the modeling side, where Harvard said there are these massive headwinds. Where one thing that seems to, for example, like one benefit is maybe there are more memory bandwidth found, which plays in favor of local for using GPUs or using. But the downside is these models are bigger in total, and they're going to need to fit. They're not even on a single. There's no way that's going to fit. Really massive. And I think especially for coding, it's not a question as much of like does it